The gunshot echoed through the main street of Sweetwater Creek, causing Lillian Rose to drop the basket of supplies she'd been carrying to her father's mercantile. The year was 1875, and this dusty Montana town had seen more than its fair share of violence since the end of the war between the states. She gathered her skirts and crouched behind a water trough, heart hammering against her corset as another shot rang out, followed by the thundering of hooves. "Come on out, Zane," a man's voice bellowed. "Nobody steals from the Blackburn gang and lives to tell about it." Lillian peered over the edge of the trough, her honey blonde hair falling loose from its pins. Down the street, a tall man in a black Stetson crouched behind a barrel, revolver drawn. She recognized him instantly. Zane Tucker, the mysterious cowboy who'd arrived in town just 3 months ago, bringing with him rumors of a troubled past and a skill with horses that had earned him a job at the Lambert Ranch outside of town. "I didn't steal anything that wasn't mine to begin with, Blackburn," Zane called back, his deep voice carrying across the street. Lillian should have run for cover like the rest of the townsfolk, but something about the determination in Zane's stance held her in place. She'd exchanged no more than polite greetings with the man during his visits to her father's store. Yet there was something about him that had captured her attention from the moment he'd tipped his hat to her on that first day. 3 men on horseback circled around the general store, cutting off Zane's escape route. The leader, a grizzled man with a jagged scar running down his cheek, dismounted and spat tobacco juice into the dirt. "You're a dead man, Tucker," he growled, advancing with his pistol raised. Something inside Lillian snapped. Without thinking, she grabbed a bottle from her fallen basket and hurled it with all her might. It shattered against the wall beside the gang leader, spraying glass and startling the horses. In that moment of confusion, Zane sprang from his position, firing 2 shots that sent the mounted men scrambling. He rolled behind the sheriff's office porch as bullets splintered the wood around him. Lillian's momentary bravery faded as the gang leader's cold eyes found her. Well. Looks like Tucker's got himself a little helper. Before she could move, the man strode toward her, grabbing her arm and yanking her to her feet. Lillian struggled against his iron grip, the smell of whiskey and sweat turning her stomach. "Let her go, Blackburn." Zane's voice carried a deadly edge now. "This is between you and me." "Seems I've found your weakness, Tucker," Blackburn sneered, pressing his gun to Lillian's temple. She closed her eyes, tears leaking from beneath her lashes as she thought of her father, who would be devastated if she died this way. The sound of a hammer clicking made her eyes fly open. Zane stood in the middle of the street, his gun aimed at Blackburn, but his face betrayed concern beneath his stoic expression. "I'll put down my gun," Zane said evenly, "if you let the lady go." "Throw it over, then we'll talk," Blackburn replied. Zane hesitated, then slowly placed his revolver in the dirt. Lillian's heart sank. He'd just signed his own death warrant. But as Blackburn's grip loosened slightly, she remembered the small derringer her father had insisted she carry since her mother's death 5 years ago. With trembling fingers, she reached for the pocket of her skirt. "That's right, Tucker. Now we're going to." Blackburn never finished his sentence. Lillian pulled the tiny gun from her pocket and fired it directly into his foot. The man howled, releasing her as he stumbled backward. Zane moved with lightning speed, retrieving his gun and firing at the remaining gang members who scattered like jackrabbits. Blackburn limped toward his horse, cursing viciously. "This ain't over, Tucker," he shouted as he pulled himself into the saddle. "Not by a long shot." The gang thundered out of town, leaving a cloud of dust in their wake. For a moment, silence hung in the air, broken only by the creaking of a sign swinging in the wind. Then Zane turned to Lillian, who stood trembling, still clutching the small derringer. "Are you hurt, Miss Rose?" he asked, his voice gentler than she'd ever heard it. "No, I'm fine," she replied, though her voice betrayed her shaken nerves. Zane took a step toward her, then stopped as townsfolk began emerging from buildings, the danger now past. His eyes held hers for a long moment before he spoke. "That was the bravest thing I've ever seen a woman do," he said quietly. "Thank you." Lillian felt a flush creep up her neck. "I couldn't just let them kill you, Mr. Tucker." Sheriff Donovan arrived, puffing from exertion, his gray handlebar mustache quivering with indignation. What in tarnation just happened here? Tucker, I should have known you'd be in the middle of this. Zane opened his mouth to reply, but Lillian stepped forward. It wasn't Mr. Tucker's fault, Sheriff. Those men came looking for trouble. The sheriff eyed her skeptically. Is that so, Miss Rose? Well, you'd better come along to my office, both of you. I need statements. As they walked toward the jailhouse, Zane leaned close to Lillian. You didn't have to do that, he murmured. I only told the truth, she replied, suddenly aware of how improper it was to be walking alone with a man she barely knew. Though I would like to know why those men were trying to kill you. A shadow crossed Zane's face. It's a long story, Miss Rose. I believe we have time, Mr. Tucker, she said, gesturing to the sheriff's office ahead. And after what just happened, I think I deserve to hear it. What Lillian didn't know as they entered the sheriff's office was that this encounter would change the course of her life forever, and that before the year was out. The entire town would witness an unexpected declaration from the mysterious cowboy who had just entered her world. In Sheriff Donovan's cramped office, Lillian sat primly on a wooden chair, her hands folded in her lap despite the lingering tremors. Zane remained standing, his tall frame making the small room feel even more confining. The sheriff settled behind his desk with a grunt, pulling out a ledger. Now then, he said, dipping his pen in ink, start from the beginning. Zane shifted his weight, eyes darting to Lillian before returning to the sheriff. The Blackburn gang has been rustling cattle from ranches across 3 territories. I caught them red-handed at the Lambert spread last week. And you decided to handle it yourself instead of coming to me. Sheriff Donovan's bushy eyebrows knitted together. With all due respect, Sheriff, by the time I rode into town, they would have been long gone with 20 head of Lambert's best breeding stock. The sheriff harumphed. So what exactly happened today? I recognized one of them in town and followed him. He spotted me, and that's when the shooting started. Zane's explanation was simple, but Lillian sensed he was leaving something out. And you, Miss Rose, what possessed you to get involved in a gunfight? Lillian lifted her chin. I was delivering supplies to Father's store when the shooting began. When I saw that man holding a gun to Mr. Tucker, I simply reacted. Sheriff Donovan's weathered face softened slightly. Your father won't be pleased to hear about this, young lady. Frederick Rose has always been protective of you, especially since your mother passed. I know, Lillian replied quietly, already dreading that conversation. The sheriff finished taking their statements, then leaned back in his creaking chair. Tucker, these men are dangerous. If they're targeting you specifically, you might consider moving on. Lillian's heart gave an unexpected lurch at the thought. I'm not running, Sheriff, Zane replied firmly. I've been hired to break horses for Mr. Lambert, and I intend to fulfill that contract. After they were dismissed, Zane escorted Lillian outside. The afternoon sun had shifted, casting long shadows across the dusty street. Townspeople had resumed their activities, though many cast curious glances their way. I should get you home, Zane said, reaching for the reins of his horse, a magnificent chestnut gelding tied nearby. My father's store is just down the street, Lillian protested. I can manage. After what happened today, I'd feel better seeing you safely there. His expression brooked no argument. As they walked side by side, Lillian gathered her courage. Mr. Tucker, you still haven't told me the whole story. Why is the Blackburn gang so determined to kill you specifically? Zane's jaw tightened, and for a moment she thought he wouldn't answer. I used to ride with them, he finally said, voice so low she almost missed it. 3 years ago, before I understood what kind of men they really were, Lillian stopped walking, shock coursing through her. You were an outlaw for 6 months after the war. His green eyes met hers unflinchingly. I came back from fighting to find my family's ranch burned to the ground and my parents dead from fever. I was angry at the world and fell in with bad company. What changed? She asked softly. They raided a homestead, a family with children. His voice roughened. I wouldn't be part of hurting innocent people. When I tried to stop them, Blackburn shot me and left me for dead. A Cheyenne medicine man found me and saved my life. I've been trying to make amends ever since. They had reached Rose Mercantile, the large storefront with its neatly painted sign a familiar comfort to Lillian. She turned to face Zane fully, studying the hard lines of his face, the weariness in his eyes that spoke of a man older than his years. "Thank you for telling me the truth," she said. "Not many would. You risked your life for mine today. You deserve to know who you were helping." He tipped his hat, preparing to leave. "Good day, Miss Rose, Mr. Tucker," she called as he turned away. When he looked back, she continued, "My father hosts a dinner after church on Sundays. Perhaps you'd consider joining us this week." Surprise flickered across his face. "I'm not sure your father would welcome someone like me at his table." "Let me worry about my father," Lillian replied with more confidence than she felt. "Consider it my way of thanking you for seeing me home safely." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Until Sunday, then." As she watched him mount his horse and ride away, Lillian knew she was inviting trouble of a different sort. Frederick Rose had high expectations for his only daughter, and a former outlaw turned ranch hand was not what he had in mind. Yet something about Zane Tucker's story, the honor evident in his actions despite his past, resonated within her. Inside the mercantile, her father looked up from helping Mrs. Patterson select fabric, his relief at seeing her quickly turning to concern. "Lillian, I heard there was trouble in town. Are you all right?" He hurried to her side, his tall frame stooped slightly from years of bending over ledgers. "I'm fine, father," she assured him, knowing the story would soon reach his ears regardless. "I'll tell you everything once we close the store." That evening, as she expected, Frederick Rose was apoplectic. "You could have been killed," he exclaimed, pacing their modest sitting room. "And now you've invited this cowboy to our Sunday dinner, a man who admits to having ridden with outlaws." "A man who left that life behind and is trying to do better," Lillian countered. "Father, he could have fled town after what happened today, but he's staying to fulfill his commitments. Doesn't that speak to his character?" Her father sighed heavily, running a hand through his graying hair. "Lillian, you have your mother's generous heart, but also her stubborn nature. I worry that you see only the good in people, even when danger is staring you in the face." "I'm not a child anymore, father. I'm 22 years old, which is precisely why I worry." "You're at an age to be thinking of marriage, of your future. The Whitmore boy has shown interest." "Edgar Whitmore is insufferably pompous," Lillian interrupted, "and treats his mother like a servant. I would sooner become a spinster schoolteacher than marry him." Frederick's expression softened. "I only want what's best for you, Lily. Your mother would have wanted you to be secure with a respectable husband." "Mother would have wanted me to be happy," she replied gently. "Please, just meet Mr. Tucker before you judge him." After a long moment, her father nodded reluctantly. "One dinner, but I make no promises beyond that." As Lillian readied herself for bed that night, she wondered at her own boldness. Why had she invited Zane Tucker to dinner? Was it merely gratitude for his protection? Or was it the undeniable pull she felt toward him, a man so different from the suitors her father usually approved? She thought of his eyes, green as summer sage, and how they'd held such intensity when he looked at her. There was danger there, yes, but also something else. Something that made her heart beat faster in a way that had nothing to do with fear. Sunday would certainly be interesting. The days leading up to Sunday passed in a blur of routine tasks at the mercantile, though Lillian found her thoughts frequently drifting to Zane Tucker. She hadn't seen him since the incident, but rumors about the shootout had spread through town like wildfire, with each retelling becoming more dramatic than the last. By Sunday morning, Lillian was a bundle of nerves as she dressed for church in her best blue calico dress, taking extra care with her hair. Her father noticed her fussing but mercifully made no comment as they walked the short distance to the white clapboard church at the edge of town. Throughout the service, Lillian found herself scanning the congregation, but there was no sign of Zane. Disappointment settled in her stomach like a stone. Perhaps he'd decided not to come after all. As they filed out into the churchyard afterward, Reverend Sinclair shaking hands with his parishioners, Lillian spotted a familiar chestnut gelding tied to the hitching post across the street. Her heart leapt foolishly before she could temper her reaction. "Father, I'll meet you at home," she said, touching Frederick's arm. "I need to speak with Mrs. Hollister about the Ladies' Aid Society meeting." Her father nodded absently, already engaged in conversation with the town banker about a shipment of goods delayed by railroad troubles. Lillian made her way through the crowd, smiling and nodding at familiar faces until she reached the edge of the churchyard. Across the street, Zane Tucker leaned against the wall of the telegraph office, watching the churchgoers. He'd cleaned up considerably. His usually dusty black coat was brushed, his dark hair trimmed, and his weathered face freshly shaved. She crossed the street, aware of curious eyes following her progress. "Mr. Tucker," she greeted him. "I didn't see you in church." "I'm not much for crowds these days," he replied, straightening as she approached. "But I remembered your invitation." "I'm glad," she said sincerely. "We should head to the house. Mrs. O'Malley will have dinner ready soon, and she gets cross if the food gets cold." They walked side by side toward the Rose residence, a comfortable two-story home behind the mercantile. Lillian was acutely aware of the sidelong glances from townsfolk they passed. "Everyone's staring," Zane observed quietly. "Small towns thrive on gossip, Mr. Tucker. By tomorrow, half of them will be convinced we're secretly engaged." She meant it as a jest, but a flush crept up her neck at the thought. "Zane," he said suddenly, "pardon, if we're to be friends, you might as well call me Zane. Mr. Tucker was my father." Lillian smiled. "Then you must call me Lillian, though only when my father isn't listening. He's quite particular about propriety." When they arrived at the house, Frederick Rose was already there, standing stiffly in the parlor. His expression when Zane entered was carefully neutral, though Lillian could read the disapproval in his eyes. "Father, this is Mr. Zane Tucker. Mr. Tucker, my father, Frederick Rose." The two men sized each other up, then shook hands firmly. "Mr. Rose," Zane said respectfully. "Thank you for allowing me into your home. Any man who protected my daughter deserves at least the courtesy of a meal," Frederick replied, his tone not quite warm but not openly hostile either. "Though I understand you have a colorful past, father," Lillian warned. "It's all right," Zane assured her. "Your father has every right to be concerned." He turned back to Frederick. "Yes, sir, I've made mistakes I'm not proud of, but for the past 2 years I've worked honest jobs and kept to the right side of the law." Mrs. O'Malley, their housekeeper and cook, announced dinner before Frederick could respond. The dining room was modest but well-appointed, with a table that could seat 8 comfortably. Today, just the 3 of them sat down to a meal of roast chicken, potatoes, and fresh bread. The first few minutes passed in awkward silence until Lillian took it upon herself to ease the tension. "Mr. Tucker has been breaking horses for the Lambert Ranch," she offered. "Mr. Lambert told me he's never seen anyone with such a way with difficult animals. Is that so?" Frederick asked, cutting his chicken precisely. "And before that, I worked cattle drives in Texas, did some scouting for the Army in Arizona Territory," Zane replied evenly. "Before that, I fought for the Union in the war." Frederick's eyebrows rose slightly at this information. "I was too old to fight, but I supported the Union cause, lost my brother at Gettysburg." "I'm sorry to hear that, sir. It was a terrible battle." The conversation shifted to safer topics: the weather, the town's growth since the railroad had come through 5 years earlier, the quality of goods arriving from back east. Gradually, Frederick's posture relaxed, and even Zane seemed less guarded. After dinner, Frederick surprised both Lillian and Zane by inviting the younger man to join him for a pipe in the small garden behind the house. Lillian busied herself helping Mrs. O'Malley clear the table, straining to catch snippets of their conversation through the open window. "My daughter seems to think highly of you," she heard her father say. "Miss Rose is a remarkable woman," came Zane's reply. "Brave and kind-hearted. You've raised her well." "Her mother's influence," Frederick said, his voice softening as it always did when speaking of his late wife. "Lillian was 17 when we lost her, had to grow up fast after that." "I understand what it's like to lose family," Zane said quietly. There was a pause before her father spoke again. "The Blackburn gang, will they come back?" "Eventually," Zane admitted, "but not for a while. They're wanted in Wyoming territory. They'll lie low before trying anything here again. And when they do, I'll be ready, and I won't let any harm come to your daughter or this town." The conviction in his voice sent a shiver down Lillian's spine. She moved away from the window, not wanting to be caught eavesdropping. When the men came back inside, her father's expression was thoughtful. Zane thanked them both for their hospitality and prepared to leave. I should get back to the ranch, he explained. Early start tomorrow. At the door, Frederick surprised Lillian again. Mr. Tucker, we host these Sunday dinners weekly. You're welcome to join us again if your work permits. The invitation wasn't particularly warm, but it was genuine. Zane glanced at Lillian, a question in his eyes. She nodded almost imperceptibly. Thank you, sir. I'd be honored. After he'd gone, Lillian turned to her father. That was unexpected, Frederick harumphed. The man has a troubled past, but he looks you in the eye when he speaks and doesn't make excuses for his mistakes. That counts for something. It was as close to approval as she could have hoped for, and Lillian found herself looking forward to the next Sunday with an eagerness that both thrilled and frightened her. Over the following weeks, Zane became a regular at the Rose household on Sundays. Each visit revealed more layers to the complex man beneath the stoic exterior. Lillian learned that he could read and write better than most men of his station, thanks to a mother who had been a schoolteacher before marrying his rancher father. He had a dry wit that emerged when he was comfortable, and a gentleness that belied his dangerous reputation. Frederick, too, warmed to him gradually, especially after Zane helped repair a troublesome leak in the store's roof that had defied the efforts of the town handyman for months. Outside of Sundays, Lillian began encountering Zane more frequently in town. He would tip his hat to her on the street, sometimes stopping to carry packages if she was running errands. They developed a friendship that was the subject of much speculation among the town gossips. One crisp October afternoon, Lillian was organizing a new shipment of books in the mercantile when the bell above the door jingled. She looked up to see Zane entering, dust from the trail still clinging to his clothes. Mr. Tucker, she greeted him, aware of Mrs. Winter's browsing fabrics nearby, ears practically perking up at the interaction. What can I help you with today, Miss Rose? He replied formally, though his eyes held a warmth reserved just for her. Mr. Lambert's asked me to pick up some supplies. He handed her a list written in a rough hand. As she gathered the items, Zane browsed the store, pausing at the small shelf of books. You've added to your collection, he observed, running a finger along the spine of a leather-bound volume. Father finally agreed to expand our literary offerings beyond practical manuals and Bibles, she said with a smile, though he still thinks novels are frivolous. What's this one? Zane asked, pulling out a book with a faded green cover. The Last of the Mohicans by James Fenimore Cooper. An adventure tale set during the French and Indian War. She finished collecting his supplies and tied the bundle with twine. Have you read it? No, but I've heard of it. He hesitated, then added the book to his pile of supplies. Been a while since I had time for reading, but the nights are getting longer. Mrs. Winters had abandoned any pretense of looking at fabrics and was openly watching their exchange, her round face alight with interest. Will there be anything else, Mr. Tucker? Lillian asked, tallying his purchases. Actually, he said, lowering his voice, I was wondering if you might like to attend the Harvest Dance with me next Saturday. The annual Harvest Dance was the social event of the season in Sweetwater Creek, a celebration that brought in folks from surrounding homesteads and ranches. Lillian had attended every year with her father, but never with a proper escort. She felt her cheeks warm. I'd like that very much. Good. He paid for his purchases, including the book. I'll call for you at 6 if that's suitable. Perfectly suitable, she replied, handing him his change, her fingers brushing his briefly. After he left, Mrs. Winters didn't even try to hide her eagerness for information. My goodness, Miss Rose. Is Mr. Tucker courting you? We're friends, Mrs. Winters, Lillian deflected, though her heart was racing at the prospect of being formally escorted to the dance. Friends indeed, the older woman replied with knowing eyes. Well, he's certainly reformed his ways since coming to Sweetwater. And handsome as sin, if you don't mind my saying so. Lillian busied herself with rearranging display items to hide her smile. Was there something specific you were looking for today, Mrs. Winters? When she told her father about the invitation that evening, Frederick frowned slightly but didn't object. I suppose it's only proper you have an escort at your age, though people will talk. People already talk, father, she pointed out gently. And you yourself said Mr. Tucker has proven himself a decent man. Decent, yes, but suitable for my daughter, he sighed. Just be careful with your heart, Lily. The man still got shadows following him. The night of the harvest dance arrived crisp and clear, with a full moon illuminating the town. The community hall had been transformed with autumn decorations, dried corn husks, pumpkins, and colorful leaves adorning every available surface. Lanterns cast a warm glow over the proceedings, and a small band of local musicians tuned their instruments in the corner. Lillian had spent hours preparing, donning her best dress of deep burgundy with lace trim at the collar and cuffs. She had pinned her hair in a more elaborate style than usual, with a few curls left loose to frame her face. When Zane arrived at their door, he stood speechless for a moment before finding his voice. "You look beautiful, Lillian." She took in his appearance with equal appreciation. He wore a clean black suit that fit his broad shoulders perfectly, with a crisp white shirt and string tie. His dark hair was neatly combed, though a stubborn lock fell across his forehead. "You clean up rather well yourself," she replied with a smile. Frederick cleared his throat behind them. "I'll be along shortly. I need to close up the store first." The walk to the hall was magical, with stars twinkling overhead and the sounds of music and laughter growing louder as they approached. Zane offered his arm, and Lillian placed her hand in the crook of his elbow, feeling the solid strength beneath the fabric of his suit. "I should warn you," she said as they neared the hall. "I haven't danced in quite some time. I may step on your toes." "I'll risk it," he replied, the corner of his mouth lifting in that half-smile she'd grown so fond of. Inside, the hall was already crowded with townsfolk and visitors from outlying areas. Conversation momentarily faltered as they entered, curious eyes taking in the unexpected pair. Lillian felt Zane tense slightly beside her. "Ignore them," she murmured. "They'll find something new to gossip about by next week." They made their way through the crowd, stopping to greet acquaintances. Lillian introduced Zane to people he hadn't yet met, smoothing over any awkward moments with practiced social grace. The band struck up a lively tune, and couples took to the floor. Zane held out his hand. "May I have this dance, Miss Rose?" She placed her hand in his, and he led her onto the dance floor. Despite his rough exterior, Zane moved with surprising grace, guiding her through the steps of the Virginia reel with confidence. "Where did you learn to dance?" she asked as they circled each other. "My mother insisted," he replied. Said no son of hers would grow up without knowing how to properly escort a lady at a social gathering. As the evening progressed, they danced several more times, with breaks for refreshments and conversation. Lillian introduced Zane to her friends, including the schoolteacher, Miss Henley, and the blacksmith's daughter, Sarah Cooper. To her delight, he was polite and engaged, showing none of the taciturn nature he often displayed in town. During a waltz, Zane held her closer than was strictly proper, his hand warm at the small of her back. "Thank you for agreeing to come with me tonight," he said quietly. "Thank you for asking," she replied, suddenly aware of how perfectly they fit together as they moved across the floor. "Are you enjoying yourself?" "More than I expected to," he admitted. "Though it's the company rather than the occasion." His green eyes held hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. For a moment, the room around them seemed to fade away, leaving just the two of them moving in harmony to the music. The spell was broken when Edgar Whitmore appeared at Zane's shoulder, his round face flushed with punch that Lillian suspected had been liberally spiked. "May I cut in?" He asked, though his tone made it more demand than request. Before Lillian could politely refuse, Frederick appeared beside them. "Edgar, good to see you. I believe your mother was looking for you by the refreshment table." Edgar hesitated, then nodded stiffly and moved away. Frederick gave Zane a measured look. "Don't monopolize my daughter all evening, Tucker. People will talk more than they already are." After her father walked away, Lillian sighed. "I'm sorry about that." "Don't be," Zane replied, though his jaw had tightened. "Your father's right. I should let you socialize with others. But I don't want to dance with anyone else," she said boldly, surprising herself with her honesty. A slow smile spread across his face. "In that case, Miss Rose, would you care to step outside for some air?" They slipped out a side door onto a small porch that overlooked the creek for which the town was named. The night air was cool, stars reflected in the slow-moving water below. Lillian wrapped her shawl more tightly around her shoulders. "Cold?" Zane asked, moving closer. "A little," she admitted. He hesitated, then placed his arm around her shoulders, providing warmth and support. Lillian knew she should step away. It was far too intimate a position for a couple who weren't formally courting, but she couldn't bring herself to move. "Lillian," Zane's voice was low, uncertain. "I need to tell you something." She turned to face him, still within the circle of his arm. "What is it?" "I've been offered a job, a good one, managing a horse breeding operation near Denver." Lillian felt as though the ground had shifted beneath her feet. "You're leaving." "I haven't decided yet." His eyes searched hers in the moonlight. "I came to Sweetwater Creek looking for a fresh start, somewhere to lie low until the Blackburn gang lost interest in me. I didn't expect to find this." "This," she repeated, her heart hammering. "You," he said simply. "Us." "Whatever this is between us." Lillian gathered her courage. "What do you want it to be?" For answer, Zane lowered his head slowly, giving her every opportunity to pull away. When she didn't, his lips met hers in a gentle kiss that nonetheless sent warmth spreading through her entire body. His hand came up to cup her cheek, and she leaned into his touch, returning the kiss with a fervor that surprised them both. When they finally broke apart, Zane rested his forehead against hers. "I've wanted to do that since the day you threw that bottle to save my life." Lillian laughed softly. "I've wanted you to do that since the day you tipped your hat to me in Father's store." The sound of the door opening caused them to step apart quickly. Frederick Rose stood in the doorway, his expression unreadable in the shadows. "It's getting late, Lillian," he said evenly. "Time we headed home." "Yes, Father." She turned to Zane. "Thank you for a lovely evening, Mr. Tucker." "The pleasure was mine, Miss Rose." He tipped his hat, his eyes conveying much more than his formal words. As she walked home between her father and Zane, the silence was heavy with unspoken words. At their door, Frederick went inside first, leaving them a moment of privacy. "Will you come to dinner tomorrow?" Lillian asked quietly. "Wouldn't miss it," Zane replied. He took her hand and pressed a kiss to her knuckles. "Good night, Lillian." That night she lay awake long after retiring, her thoughts a whirl of confusion and joy. She touched her lips, still feeling the pressure of his kiss. Denver was so far away. Would he go? And if he stayed, what future could they have together? A former outlaw and a merchant's daughter. Yet as she finally drifted off to sleep, it was with a smile on her face and hope in her heart. The next morning, Frederick Rose was unusually quiet as they prepared for church. As they walked along the sunlit street, he finally spoke. "I saw you with Tucker last night." Lillian's cheeks burned. "Father," he held up a hand. "Let me finish. I've watched how he is with you these past weeks. The man clearly cares for you deeply. And despite my reservations about his past, I can see he's trying to build an honorable life now." Lillian blinked in surprise. "Are you saying you approve?" "I'm saying I won't stand in the way if he declares his intentions honorably." Frederick's voice softened. "Your mother would have liked him, I think. She always could see the good in people, just like you." Tears pricked at Lillian's eyes. "Thank you, Father." After church, they returned home to find Zane already waiting on their porch, hat in hand. He stood as they approached, his expression serious. "Mr. Rose, Miss Rose," he greeted them formally. "Mr. Rose, might I have a word with you in private?" Frederick studied him for a long moment, then nodded. "Come into my study." Lillian watched them disappear into the house, her stomach knotting with nervous anticipation. She busied herself helping Mrs. O'Malley in the kitchen, though her mind was elsewhere. Nearly an hour passed before the men emerged. Frederick's expression gave nothing away, but Zane's eyes sought hers immediately, a new light in their depths. "Lillian," her father said, "Mr. Tucker has something he'd like to discuss with you. I'll be helping Mrs. O'Malley set the table." When they were alone in the parlor, Zane crossed to where she stood by the window. "I've been offered that job in Denver," he began, and her heart sank. "But I've decided not to take it." Hope flared within her. "You're staying in Sweetwater Creek." "That depends," he replied, taking her hands in his. "Lillian, when I came here, I was just looking for a quiet place to start over. I never expected to find someone like you, someone who saw past my mistakes to the man I'm trying to become." He took a deep breath. "I spoke with your father about my intentions. I want to court you properly with his blessing, and if you'll have me, eventually I'd like to make you my wife." Tears of happiness sprang to Lillian's eyes. "Are you proposing to me, Zane Tucker?" "Not yet," he said with a smile. "When I do, I want to do it right, but I am asking if you'll let me court you, knowing that's where my heart is headed." "Yes," she whispered, squeezing his hands. "Yes, I would like that very much." He lifted one hand to gently brush away a tear that had escaped down her cheek. "Your father has given his conditional approval. He wants to see that I can provide for you, that I'm truly committed to my new path." "And are you?" she asked softly. "More than ever," he promised. "I've been saving every penny from breaking horses. With a little more time, I can put a down payment on a small ranch of my own. Build something worthy of offering you." The certainty in his voice filled Lillian with warmth. "I don't need a grand ranch, Zane, just you." His kiss was tender, full of promise and restrained passion. When they parted, his eyes were dark with emotion. "You'll have both, Lillian Rose. That's my promise to you." Winter descended on Sweetwater Creek with a vengeance that year. Heavy snows isolated the town for weeks at a time, making travel difficult and dangerous. Despite the weather, Zane faithfully made the journey from the Lambert Ranch to town each Sunday for dinner with Lillian and her father, sometimes staying overnight in the small hotel rather than risking the return trip in darkness. Their courtship progressed steadily, with Zane proving his commitment not just to Lillian, but to becoming a respected member of the community. He volunteered to help build a new schoolhouse when the old one was damaged in a blizzard, and he organized the men of the Lambert Ranch to clear snow from the streets of town when drifts threatened to cut off access to the mercantile and other essential businesses. By spring, even the most skeptical townsfolk had begun to accept that Zane Tucker was more than his troubled past. He was a man determined to build a future. In April, with the snow melting and the first wildflowers appearing on the prairie, Zane approached Frederick Rose after Sunday dinner. "Sir, I'd like your permission to ask for Lillian's hand in marriage." Frederick set down his pipe slowly. "I've watched you these past months, Tucker. You've proven yourself steady and hardworking, but can you provide for my daughter? She's accustomed to certain comforts." "I've saved nearly enough for that piece of land southwest of town, the old Peterson place. Good water, decent grazing. With the contacts I've made breaking horses for Lambert, I can start my own breeding operation. It won't be easy at first, but I'll make sure Lillian never wants for anything essential." Frederick studied him thoughtfully. "Peterson's asking a high price for that land." "I'm aware, sir. I'm still about $300 short." To Zane's surprise, Frederick rose and went to his desk, unlocking a drawer and removing a leather pouch. He counted out several bills and handed them to Zane. "Consider it an investment in my daughter's future," he said gruffly, "but I expect to see a return on it in the form of her happiness." Zane stared at the money in his hand. "Sir, don't thank me yet, Tucker. You still have to convince Lillian to accept you, and she has her mother's stubborn streak." Zane smiled. "That's one of the things I love about her." With the financial obstacle removed, Zane threw himself into preparations. He negotiated the purchase of the Peterson land, making plans to build a proper house before he would bring Lillian there as his bride. He selected a ring from a catalog at the mercantile, having it specially ordered from Denver. On a warm day in early May, Zane asked Lillian to ride with him to see the property. They traveled on horseback, Lillian riding side saddle on a gentle mare Zane had trained specifically for her. The Peterson place was nestled in a small valley, protected from the worst of the prairie winds by low hills. A creek ran through the property, widening into a small pond near where the original cabin stood. Though the cabin was in disrepair, the location was picturesque, with cottonwood trees providing shade and meadows bright with spring flowers. "It's beautiful," Lillian breathed as they dismounted near the pond. "Is this the land you've been telling Father about?" "It is," Zane confirmed, watching her face as she took in their surroundings. "As of yesterday, it's mine, or it will be once the papers are registered in town." Lillian turned to him, eyes wide. "You bought it." "Oh, Zane, that's wonderful." "I thought we could picnic here," he suggested, unpacking a basket from his saddlebag. "Mrs. O'Malley helped me put this together." They spread a blanket beneath a cottonwood tree, sharing cold chicken, bread, and apple pie as they discussed his plans for the property. "The cabin's too far gone to save," Zane explained, "but I've drawn up plans for a proper house. 2 stories with a big kitchen and a parlor for entertaining, even a small library for your books." Lillian's eyes shone. "You've thought of everything." "I've had plenty of time to think about what our life could be like," he replied, taking her hand. "If you want the same things I do." Her breath caught as he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Opening it, he revealed a delicate gold ring with a small but perfect diamond. "Lillian Rose," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "I came to Sweetwater Creek looking for a hiding place but found a home instead. You've shown me what it means to be the kind of man who deserves happiness. Will you make me the happiest man in Montana Territory by becoming my wife?" Tears filled her eyes. "Zane Tucker, are you asking me to marry you?" "I am," he confirmed, suddenly uncertain as she didn't immediately answer. "Unless you need more time to—" "Yes," she interrupted, laughing through her tears. "Yes, I will marry you." Relief and joy washed over his face as he slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, catching the sunlight as she admired it. "It's beautiful," she whispered. "When did you get this?" "Ordered it from Denver 2 months ago. Your father helped me determine the size." He pulled her close, kissing her with all the love and promise he felt for their future together. When they finally parted, both breathless, he rested his forehead against hers. "I want to announce our engagement at the Founders' Day celebration next week. The whole town will be there." "Father already knows, I assume," he gave his blessing. "And $300 toward the land purchase, though I tried to refuse." Lillian smiled. "He's giving us his approval in the only way he knows how." The Founders' Day celebration was Sweetwater Creek's biggest annual event, commemorating the establishment of the town 20 years earlier. The entire community gathered in the town square for food, games, and speeches by prominent citizens. On the morning of the celebration, Lillian dressed with particular care in a new gown of pale blue that complemented her eyes. She wore her hair partly up, secured with her mother's pearl combs, the rest falling in soft waves down her back. The engagement ring sparkled on her finger, though she had kept it hidden with gloves whenever in public that week. Honoring Zane's wish to make their announcement formal and public, Frederick escorted her to the square, where festivities were already underway. Children ran between booths playing games, women gossiped over displays of handicrafts, and men gathered to discuss cattle prices and politics. The mouth-watering smell of barbecue filled the air. Lillian searched the crowd for Zane but didn't see him. "Where is Mr. Tucker?" she asked her father. "He said he would meet us here." Frederick frowned slightly. "He'll be along, I'm sure." As noon approached, Mayor Simmons called for attention, ready to begin the official program. Still, there was no sign of Zane. Unease began to gnaw at Lillian's stomach. The mayor's speech droned on, followed by Reverend Sinclair offering a blessing for the town's continued prosperity. Throughout it all, Lillian kept glancing toward the roads leading into town, hoping to see Zane riding in. When the speeches concluded and people began lining up for the barbecue lunch, Sheriff Donovan approached Frederick and Lillian, his expression grave. "Mr. Rose, Miss Rose," he greeted them, tipping his hat. "Might I have a word in private?" They stepped away from the crowd, and Lillian's heart began to pound with dread. "What is it, Sheriff? Is it about Zane?" The sheriff nodded solemnly. "I'm afraid so, Miss Rose. There was trouble at the Lambert Ranch this morning. The Blackburn gang returned." Fear gripped Lillian's throat. "Is he hurt? Where is he?" "He's alive," Sheriff Donovan assured her quickly. "But there was a gunfight. 2 of Lambert's hands were wounded and Tucker took a bullet to the shoulder. Doc Thompson is tending to him now." Without waiting for more information, Lillian gathered her skirts and started toward the doctor's office at the end of the street. Frederick and the sheriff hurried after her. "Lillian, wait," her father called. "Let the doctor do his work." "I need to see him," she insisted, not slowing her pace. The doctor's waiting room was empty when they arrived, but voices could be heard from behind the closed examination room door. Lillian paced anxiously while Frederick spoke quietly with the sheriff, getting details of what had happened. "Blackburn showed up with 5 men," the sheriff explained. They demanded Tucker come with them, said they had unfinished business. When he refused, they opened fire. Tucker and the ranch hands managed to drive them off, but not before casualties on both sides. One of Blackburn's men was killed, and Blackburn himself took a bullet to the leg. "Will they be back?" Frederick asked. Sheriff Donovan shook his head. "Not likely. We captured 2 of them. The others, including Blackburn, fled north toward the Canadian border. I've sent telegrams to law enforcement all along their likely route. Their days of terrorizing this territory are numbered." The examination room door opened, and Dr. Thompson emerged, wiping his hands on a towel. "He'll be fine," he announced before Lillian could ask. "The bullet went through clean, missed anything vital. He's lost some blood, but should recover fully with rest." "Can I see him?" Lillian asked, her voice trembling. The doctor nodded. "Briefly. He's weak, but asking for you." Zane lay on the examination table, his upper body bare except for the white bandage wrapped around his left shoulder and chest. His face was pale, but his eyes brightened when Lillian entered. "I'm sorry," he said immediately. "Wanted to meet you at the celebration, had it all planned out." She hurried to his side, taking his right hand in both of hers. "Don't you dare apologize for being shot, Zane Tucker. I'm just grateful you're alive. Blackburn's gone for good this time," he assured her. "Won't be coming back to haunt us anymore. I don't care about Blackburn, I care about you getting well." She leaned down to press a gentle kiss to his forehead. "Our announcement can wait." "No," he said firmly, struggling to sit up despite Dr. Thompson's protests. "I've waited too long already. Help me up, Doc, I have somewhere to be." "You're in no condition to go anywhere," the doctor objected. "You need rest." "What I need is to ask the woman I love to marry me in front of the whole town, like I promised her." Zane's determination was evident in every line of his body. "I'll rest afterward." Dr. Thompson looked to Frederick, who had entered behind Lillian. After a moment's consideration, Frederick nodded. "Let's get him dressed. I'll send word to the mayor to hold the closing ceremonies until we arrive." Despite the doctor's continued objections, they helped Zane into a clean shirt brought by one of the Lambert hands, carefully easing his injured arm into the sleeve. The effort left him pale and sweating, but he refused to lie back down. "I can make it," he insisted. "Just need a little help walking." With Frederick supporting him on his uninjured side, they made their way slowly back to the town square. Word of the shooting had spread through the celebration, and a hush fell over the crowd as they appeared. Mayor Simmons, who had been informed of their plan, quickly called for everyone's attention. "Before we conclude our Founders' Day celebration," he announced, "Mr. Zane Tucker has something he'd like to say to us all." With Frederick's help, Zane made his way to the small platform where the speeches had been given earlier. Lillian remained at the edge of the crowd, her heart in her throat as she watched the man she loved struggle to stand tall despite his injury. "People of Sweetwater Creek," Zane began, his voice carrying across the suddenly silent square. "Many of you know I came to your town with a troubled past. What you may not know is that I found salvation here in the form of the most remarkable woman I've ever known." His eyes found Lillian in the crowd, and the love in them made her breath catch. "Miss Lillian Rose has agreed to become my wife," he continued, "and I wanted all of you to witness my pledge to her. I promise to spend every day of my life trying to be worthy of her love and trust." He reached into his pocket with his good hand, producing a simple gold band. "Lillian, would you join me?" With all eyes upon her, Lillian made her way through the parting crowd to the platform. Zane took her hand, his touch steady despite his weakened state. "This was my mother's wedding band," he explained softly. "I'd be honored if you would wear it as a symbol of our engagement until our wedding day." Tears blurred Lillian's vision as she nodded. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I will." She extended her hand, expecting him to slip the ring onto her finger. Instead, to her surprise, she felt a moment of resistance. "I know you tried to refuse my proposal ring once before, saying you needed time," Zane said, loud enough for those nearest to hear. "But I'm not letting you change your mind now." With that, he slid the gold band onto her finger alongside the diamond engagement ring, a playful smile lighting his weary features. "Now the whole town has witnessed it. Your promise to me, Lillian Rose." A cheer went up from the crowd, led by Frederick Rose himself, who stood nearby with unmistakable pride on his face. Mayor Simmons stepped forward, raising his hands for quiet. "Ladies and gentlemen, I believe this calls for a celebration. The band will play and I declare the dancing officially begun, and the first dance will be for our newly engaged couple. Once the doctor says it's permitted," he added, noting Dr. Thompson's concerned expression. "One dance," the doctor conceded with a sigh. "Then straight to bed, Tucker." Doctor's orders. As the band struck up a gentle waltz, Zane held Lillian close with his good arm, swaying more than dancing. "Not exactly how I planned to announce our engagement," he murmured into her hair. "It's perfect," she replied, careful not to press against his injured shoulder. "Though I would have preferred you without the bullet wound. Small price to pay for freedom from Blackburn's shadow," he said. "Now we can build our future without looking over our shoulders." The song ended all too soon, and Dr. Thompson appeared at their side, insistent that Zane return to the clinic for proper rest. As Frederick helped him down from the platform, Lillian found herself surrounded by well-wishers, friends, and neighbors offering congratulations and examining her rings with admiring eyes. Mrs. Winters, predictably, was among the first to approach. "I knew it," she declared triumphantly. "I told everyone there was something special between you two. When's the wedding to be, dear?" "We haven't set a date yet," Lillian replied, her eyes following Zane's slow progress through the crowd. "But I imagine once his shoulder is healed." "You must let me help with the arrangements," Mrs. Winters insisted. "My Sophia's wedding was the talk of the territory 3 years ago." Lillian thanked her politely, continuing to accept congratulations while keeping Zane in her sight. When he finally disappeared into the doctor's office with Frederick and Dr. Thompson, she made her excuses and hurried after them. She found Zane already settled in the clinic's small recovery room, looking exhausted but content. Frederick stood by the window, speaking quietly with the doctor. "There she is," Zane said as she entered, reaching for her hand. "My future wife." Lillian sat carefully on the edge of the bed. "How are you feeling?" "Like I could sleep for a week," he admitted, "but happier than I've ever been." Dr. Thompson approached, a small bottle in his hand. "This will help with the pain and help you sleep," he explained, measuring a dose into a spoon. "Miss Rose, he needs rest now. You can return in the morning." After Zane had taken the medicine, Lillian leaned down to kiss him gently. "I'll be back first thing tomorrow. Sleep well, my love." His eyes were already growing heavy, but he managed to smile. "Dream of me." "Always," she promised, squeezing his hand before following her father out. As they walked home through the twilight, the sounds of the continuing celebration fading behind them, Frederick placed a gentle hand on Lillian's shoulder. "Your mother would be proud of the woman you've become," he said softly, "and of the man you've chosen." Tears stung Lillian's eyes at the unexpected words. "Do you really think so?" "I know so." He paused, looking up at the first stars appearing in the darkening sky. "She always said true love doesn't choose the easy path. It finds the right one." Lillian touched the 2 rings on her finger, feeling the weight of their promise. "I believe we have, Father, I truly do." Over the next 6 weeks, Zane recovered from his wound under the attentive care of both Dr. Thompson and Lillian, who visited daily with home-cooked meals and books to pass the time. As his strength returned, they began making concrete plans for their future. The old Peterson cabin was demolished, and construction began on a proper house using lumber from the sawmill in the next town over. Zane worked alongside the builders whenever his shoulder permitted, determined to create a home worthy of his bride. Word came from the territorial marshal that Jed Blackburn had been captured trying to cross into Canada. He would stand trial for multiple murders and robberies across 3 territories, charges that would likely see him hanged or imprisoned for life. The shadow that had hung over Zane's life for so long was finally lifted. By mid-July, the new house was nearly complete, a handsome 2-story structure with a wide porch wrapping around 3 sides. Inside, the rooms were spacious and bright, with large windows to catch the prairie breezes. Zane had spared no expense on the kitchen and the promised library, knowing these would be the spaces Lillian would cherish most. They set their wedding date for the first Saturday in August. The entire town buzzed with preparations, with Mrs. Winters taking charge of decorating the church and Mrs. O'Malley coordinating the wedding feast to be held in the town square afterward. Lillian chose a wedding gown of ivory silk ordered from Chicago, with seed pearls adorning the bodice and a lace veil that had belonged to her mother. Sarah Cooper and Miss Henley would serve as her attendants, while Mr. Lambert had agreed to stand as Zane's best man. The night before the wedding, a traditional dinner was held at the Rose home for the wedding party and close friends. The mood was festive, with toasts and good-natured teasing about married life. When the guests had departed, Frederick asked Zane and Lillian to join him in his study. From his desk drawer, he removed a small wooden box which he handed to Lillian. "Your mother wanted you to have this on your wedding day," he explained, his voice thick with emotion. "I've kept it safe all these years." Inside the box was a delicate gold locket on a fine chain. When Lillian opened it, she found a miniature portrait of her mother on one side and her father on the other, painted in the early days of their marriage. "It's beautiful," she whispered, tears filling her eyes. "There's something else," Frederick said, presenting Zane with an envelope. "The deed to the mercantile." Zane stared at him in confusion. "Sir, I'm not giving it to you outright," Frederick clarified, "but I'm making you a partner in the business. 1/3 ownership now, with the rest to come to you and Lillian after I'm gone. The store has provided well for this family for 20 years. It can continue to do so while you build your horse breeding operation." Zane was momentarily speechless. "Mr. Rose, I don't know what to say. This is far more than I ever expected." "You make my daughter happy," Frederick replied simply. "That's payment enough. But I'm not ready to retire just yet, so don't think you're getting out of working for your share," he added with a rare smile. The wedding day dawned clear and bright, a perfect August morning. The church filled early with townsfolk and visitors from surrounding communities, all eager to witness the union of Sweetwater Creek's most talked-about couple. Zane stood at the altar, resplendent in a new black suit, his dark hair neatly trimmed and his face cleanly shaved. He shifted nervously from foot to foot until the church doors opened and the first notes of the wedding march sounded from the small organ. Sarah Cooper and Miss Henley processed first in gowns of pale yellow, carrying bouquets of wildflowers. Then came Lillian on her father's arm, a vision in ivory silk and lace, her golden hair arranged in elegant curls beneath her veil. Zane felt his breath catch at the sight of her. As she drew nearer, he could see her eyes shining with unshed tears of happiness. Frederick placed her hand in Zane's, the symbolic gesture of giving his daughter into the care of her new husband, moving many in the congregation to dab at their eyes. Reverend Sinclair began the ceremony with a prayer, followed by a brief sermon on the sanctity and responsibilities of marriage. When it came time for the vows, Zane's voice rang clear and confident through the church. "I, Zane Tucker, take thee, Lillian Rose, to be my lawfully wedded wife. To have and to hold, from this day forward, for better or for worse, for richer or for poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish, till death do us part." Lillian's voice was softer but equally certain as she repeated the same words. Then came the exchange of rings Zane's mother's band for him, and a new gold band for Lillian that would rest alongside her engagement ring. "By the power vested in me by God and the territory of Montana," Reverend Sinclair concluded, "I now pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss your bride." Zane lifted Lillian's veil, revealing her radiant face. He cupped her cheek gently with one hand and leaned down to place a tender kiss on her lips, mindful of the watching congregation. The church erupted in cheers and applause as they turned to face their friends and neighbors as Mr. and Mrs. Zane Tucker. The celebration that followed in the town square lasted well into the evening. Tables groaned under the weight of food contributed by every household in Sweetwater Creek. The band played continuously, and couples danced beneath lanterns strung between trees as the sun set in a blaze of orange and purple. As tradition dictated, Zane and Lillian shared the first dance, a waltz that had them gliding gracefully across the wooden platform constructed for the occasion. Zane's shoulder had healed completely, allowing him to hold his bride close as they moved in perfect harmony. Happy Mrs. Tucker, he murmured against her ear. Completely, she replied, her eyes shining up at him. And you, more than I ever thought possible. He twirled her gently, then pulled her back into his arms. I still can't quite believe you're mine. Believe it, she said, reaching up to touch his cheek. I have the rings to prove it. As the evening progressed, they followed all the wedding traditions, cutting the three-tiered cake Mrs. O'Malley had labored over for days, receiving gifts from the townspeople, and participating in the various customs meant to bring luck to their marriage. Finally, as midnight approached, they prepared to depart for their new home. A wagon decorated with flowers and ribbons waited to carry them the short distance to their ranch. Friends and family gathered to see them off, showering them with rice and good wishes. Frederick embraced his daughter tightly. Be happy, Lily, he whispered. That's all I've ever wanted for you. I will be, father, she assured him, kissing his cheek. Come for dinner next Sunday. The house will be ready for visitors by then. After one last round of farewells, Zane helped Lillian into the wagon and took the reins. As they pulled away from the square, the assembled guests cheered and waved, their voices fading as the wagon followed the moonlit road out of town. The new house gleamed white in the moonlight, windows aglow with lamps that Mrs. O'Malley had thoughtfully lit before departing earlier that evening. Wildflowers lined the path to the front porch, their sweet scent filling the night air. Zane brought the wagon to a stop and turned to his bride. Welcome home, Mrs. Tucker. Before Lillian could respond, he set the brake and jumped down, coming around to her side. In one smooth motion, he lifted her into his arms. Zane, she laughed. Your shoulder is perfectly fine, he assured her, carrying her up the steps and across the threshold. And I intend to carry my bride into our home the proper way. Inside, the house was even more beautiful than Lillian remembered from her last visit during construction. Polished wood floors gleamed, and new furniture arranged according to her specifications waited to be used. Zane had spared no expense, using much of his savings to ensure their home was comfortable and welcoming from the first day. He set her down gently in the parlor, keeping his arms around her waist. Do you like it? Now that it's finished, it's perfect, she assured him, leaning up to kiss him properly without the restraint required in front of the congregation. Everything I could have dreamed of. Zane deepened the kiss, his hands sliding up her back to tangle in her carefully arranged curls. I've been waiting all day to get you alone, he murmured against her lips. And I've been waiting all day for exactly that, she replied boldly, her fingers working at his tie. Perhaps you should show me the rest of the house, starting with our bedroom. His eyes darkened with desire as he took her hand, leading her toward the stairs. With pleasure, Mrs. Tucker, with pleasure. 5 years later, the Tucker Ranch had grown from a modest homestead to one of the most successful horse breeding operations in the territory. Zane's skill with horses and Lillian's head for business had proven to be a winning combination. Their reputation for raising and training quality stock had spread, bringing buyers from as far away as St. Louis and Chicago. The house had expanded as well, with a new wing added to accommodate their growing family. Their son, Frederick James Tucker, now 3 years old, had his father's dark hair and his mother's blue eyes. Their daughter, Marie Elizabeth, just turned 1, was the image of Lillian with golden curls and a sunny disposition. On a warm August evening, the 5th anniversary of their wedding, the entire family gathered for a celebratory dinner at the Tucker Ranch. Frederick Rose, now semi-retired from the mercantile with Zane overseeing much of the day-to-day operations, bounced his granddaughter on his knee while young Freddie showed off his new wooden horse to anyone who would look. As twilight fell, Lillian found Zane on the porch, gazing out at the land they had built together. She slipped her arm around his waist, leaning her head against his shoulder. Happy anniversary, my love, she said softly. He turned to embrace her fully, his eyes as full of love as they had been on their wedding day. 5 years. Sometimes it seems like yesterday that I rode into Sweetwater Creek, and sometimes it feels like I've loved you all my life. Either way, I'm grateful, she replied, reaching up to touch the lines that had begun to appear at the corners of his eyes, lines of laughter and happiness, not worry or fear. From his pocket, Zane produced a small velvet box. "I have something for you to mark the occasion." Inside was a delicate bracelet of gold filigree studded with small sapphires that matched her eyes. "It's beautiful," she breathed as he fastened it around her wrist. "Not half as beautiful as you," he replied, bringing her hand to his lips. "Or the life you've given me." From inside the house came the sound of their son's laughter, followed by Frederick's deep chuckle and baby Marie's delighted squeal. "We should go back in," Lillian said, though she made no move to leave the circle of Zane's arms. "They'll be wondering where we've gone." "Let them wonder," he murmured, bending to kiss her with the same passion that had marked their first kiss on the night of the harvest dance. "I'm not done telling my wife how much I love her." As the stars appeared one by one in the darkening sky, Lillian Tucker stood in the embrace of the man who had once placed a ring on her finger before the whole town, refusing to let her refuse him. It had been the first of many moments when Zane's determination and love had shaped their shared destiny, leading them to this life of contentment and purpose she had never dared to dream possible. And as she returned his kiss beneath the vast Montana sky, Lillian knew with absolute certainty that this was exactly where she was meant to be in the arms of her cowboy, surrounded by the family they had created together, their love as enduring as the land they called home.